Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy you're here. We are small but mighty. And thank you for coming out. I realize our community, the Grand Ports boundary country, got hard hit with this flood, and it's on everybody's minds. And I've been volunteering at the Red Cross, and we're just in recovery mode now. So a lot of events have been canceled, a lot of meetings have been canceled, but we decided, the museum and myself, to go ahead with this. We felt it was really important, and I'm so glad that both Sinixt and Doukhobors are here. I want to do just a few brief introductions. I especially want to thank the board of directors of the museum for supporting the Sinixt Doukhobors Reconciliation Project. I just want to introduce Lee DeHersa, our president.
Hi, everyone.
Let me see. Monica Coleshill, secretary. Kathy Rush, treasurer, way at the back. Sam Semenoff, director. Have I missed anybody? I think that's good. And I also want to thank, as far as I know, Lori Barkley from Selkirk College, teacher of anthropology, very supportive. And Linda Wilkinson, I'm very happy that you're here, teacher in peace studies. And her husband, Myler Wilkinson, was instrumental in preparing a lot of the material and encouraging people to focus on the reconciliation stone that was unveiled in Brilliant in 2009. So thank you very much, Linda. Oh, yes, of course. My cohort in crime, or wonderful events and things, is Shannon Profili, manager and consultant for all our projects. And also thank you to Vanessa, I forget, Pavan, Canada Works summer student who has fabulous creative ideas. So thank you very much. And now I just want to say thank you and give some gifts to the main speakers.
We haven't even done anything.
Just so you know, what you just witnessed is traditional protocol. When Joan offered me tobacco, it's a respectful gesture to offer tobacco to an elder to who is sharing their knowledge, and so her offering me tobacco is following that protocol, which is part of cultural safety. It's part of cultural learning, teaching, knowing, getting to know. When you're approaching culture, there are certain protocols. If you follow them, you create cultural safety. And it is really a big step towards truth and reconciliation. The reason that I raised it above my head and said limp, 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 which is thank you, gratuity, is because what I share isn't Marilyn James. What I share is what's been taught to me by my elders, what's been shared with me by my elders who are now my ancestors. So for me to claim it would for me to just be say, oh, thank you, it's me, it's all me. But no, I know where this knowledge came from. I'm grateful to have it, and I also want to represent it with honor. Thank you.
JJ, bread, salt, and water.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Joan. Yes, I also have a little gift that I would like to pass on to Marilyn and to the museum here. And it's definitely not from me either. I did not make this. But these are handcrafts made by our menfolk. And I'm presenting it to Marilyn because of the difficult, arduous road that she walks. And to the museum, in gratitude and in recognition of the knowledge that museums only don't deal with the past and history. They also help, or they can help, to shape the present and the future. So thank you, Boundary Museum Society.
Thank you, JJ. Beautiful.
And we could break bread afterwards.
These were made by M. Seminoff. Okay, M. Seminoff.
Mike Seminoff and the
Mike
Kootenai Men's Group.
Okay.
There's cards in there explaining.
Thank you. We'll hang them up in the entrance.
So thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, JJ. I just want to say a few words about how the Sinixt Doukhobors reconciliation, it's going to be both an exhibit in the museum and an ongoing project through time. And I became aware of what had happened in 2009 in Brilliant. I think it was 2016, actually. I was hired here in 2015. 2016, I was doing research, and I found out the exhibit we have in there now is Sinixt, and I wanted to know more. I didn't know a lot. So every step of the way, JJ has been very encouraging and steering me on the right path. And he said, first of all, you have to contact Marilyn James if you're going to have a school program about the Sinixt. So I said, yes, okay, I can do that. And when JJ heard about my idea, I want an exhibit, I want a project, I want it to be audio and video, and I not only want it to be about the 2009 moment in Brilliant between Lonnie Reyes and JJ and the unveiling of the granite plaque, but I also wanted it to go forward in time with different Doukhobors, different Sinixt, and also all those who were so enthusiastic and supported it. The teachers at Selkirk College, Myler Wilkinson, his name comes up over and over again. And also Muriel Walton and so many others. I intend to record conversations going through time, and it'll go up on our audio-visual display. And people from all over the world come here, believe it or not, our little museum. And they'll be able to put the headset on and listen to these conversations, and they'll start to think about things. And I also feel like sometimes I don't have a good grasp of what reconciliation is, either personally or my own ancestors. So I've had to slowly learn what this is all about. And one of the first things I found in my research was a wonderful picture of Eva Orr and a quote from her. And that just keeps ringing through me. And she said, when you take care of your ancestors take care of you. So that was my premise for teaching the school children of the Boundary area. I started asking them, who are your ancestors? Where is their land? Where are their graves? What have you done with your ancestors? And the reason I do that is it seems to me that reconciliation, part of it is about history and memory, but part of it is about going forward into the future. Well, you can't do that if you don't have any roots. You're like a tree with all the branches and leaves and the trunk, which is what a lot of modern people are today, and sometimes I live that way too. You've got to have and explore your ancestors, which are the roots. And then you can be grounded, and then you can reach very far and very high. Because to try and find reconciliation means you're trying to find a way through to peace, I think. But around the world right now, when you check on the news, how can people try to grasp peace given what we're going through? So to me, this is a little gem of a project and an exhibit, and I just feel really deeply in my heart and soul that this is going to lead us somewhere. And history reveals itself often. You can't really write history ahead of time. So I'm here saying, I want both the Sinixt and the Doukhobors, who have roots, who know their ancestors, to lead the way for us, for those of us who don't even know what our roots are. Anyway, I have so much more to say. I was going to read to you from Myler Wilkinson. I was going to do this whole history lesson, but that's, I think, for a later time. I think right now I would like to turn it over to KL. We're going to switch up the program a bit because Therese and Rocco and Neba, they have to leave early. So I'm going to turn this over to KL.
Thank you, Joan. So I feel like I'm sitting in very good company here, and I feel honored to be part of this occasion. And because we're talking about ancestors, I would like to introduce myself through my ancestors. My name is K.L. Kivi, and my parents came to Canada as refugees from Estonia during World War II. The Estonian people have suffered very deeply from colonialism, both Russian and German. And it's these roots and knowing these roots that led me to work specifically with Marilyn. And I just wanted to also reference the bread and the salt. In Estonian, housewarming is called soolalev, which means bread and salt, and that's the first gift we bring in my culture to people who are inhabiting a new home. So there are many links here. So Marilyn and I started talking about this project actually on a blockade. We were blocking a road where there was going to be logging happening on Mount Sentinel, and we started talking about how I could participate as a writer in the work of Sinixt resurgence. And we started talking about language and the endangerment that the Sinixt language or dialect is under, and bringing out words and somehow stories around that. And the project grew and grew and grew until a few years ago we were sitting in the Kootenai Co-op Radio studios in Nelson recording traditional and contemporary Sinixt stories told by Therese and Marilyn. And then we'd follow each story with a discussion. What does this story mean? I mean, the stories are full of these strange characters, Nina, Owl Woman, Sinclip, Coyote, and to those of us who've been brought up in a different paradigm, they can seem odd or not understandable. And so Marilyn and Therese then told us what are the meanings in these stories? What are the roots of these stories? So that's how this project came to be. And so one of the products of that is this book. Now this book does not have the stories in it. Each chapter has a summary of a story. Here's an example. So this is why mosquitoes bite people. There's a summary. The actual story, if you want to hear that, you go and you download the audio files. There's information in the book about how you get those audio files from the website, and you can listen to each and every story. And then you come back and you look at the beautiful artwork done by 17 different Kootenai regional artists, specifically for each story. And then you read the interpretation, what this story is about, what it means on a different level. So that's one thing that came out of all those recordings. The other thing that came out of them is that we are broadcasting and putting up for podcast 22 different episodes, each one based on a different story, called Sinixt Stories, Ancestral Roots, Cultural Seeds, and that's available through the Kootenai Co-op Radio website. You can go on there and you can see what's already been loaded up for podcast, and you can listen if you have a home computer, or if you don't, you get your children or grandchildren to figure it out for you and put it on a something you can listen to it on. And another component that's coming out of this is that there's a couple of teachers who are working right now. They'll be ready for the next school year on a teacher's guide that goes with this book, so that teachers can take this book and they can figure out how to make use of it best in classrooms, elementary, high school, and college level. So that's in the works. And it's just kind of like the stories are rippling out, and we encourage people to engage with them because they're living things, and that's part of the reason we didn't want to write them down. They come from an oral tradition. We want to honor that oral tradition and keep them in their living oral tradition. Just keep them moving forward in that way. So I won't say much more about that. I will turn the mic over to Marilyn. In introducing Marilyn, so many people in the Kootenays already know who Marilyn James is, that I haven't been introducing her at these events. I just assume everybody knows who Marilyn is. What I'd like to say about Marilyn, though, because it says on this piece of paper that I'm supposed to introduce her, is that Marilyn is a force of nature. I have such deep, deep admiration for someone who can stand in their truth against so much opposition and people turning their faces away, and keep standing in that truth and hold it in such an honorable way. I ask anybody who has ever, complained to me about how Marilyn is angry, I say, can you stand in her shoes for even an hour as a Sinixt person whose ancestors have asked her to stand for the truth of their existence? I don't think I can. And Marilyn is a role model, and I deeply honor her for that work of holding up that truth. And may she inspire the rest of us also to stand in the many difficult truths that we have to uphold in this world right now. The other thing I want to say about Marilyn that I've learned during this process of working with her over the last couple of years, she is funny, generous, and kind. Marilyn.
I just want to talk a little bit about how I feel about the book and how this all got started. Was Eva told me after a repatriation and reburial of ancestral remains, she said to me, "Let's go up and say goodbye to the ancestors." So we went up to where the ancestors are all reburied now, 64 at that occupation site. We were the first Indian people in Canada to repatriate human remains, and we repatriated 64 to that site. And so when we went up there to say goodbye, she said to me, "Kasapi, Kasapi, Kasapi." And she looked up at the mountain. The neighbor had gone in with his bulldozer and bulldozed the landscape there. So at that point, you could look up and see the mountain. And she told me the story of Frog Mountain. I was so struck by that story that I just thought, this is so relevant today. We need this story. Eva, can I have your permission to write this story down and to share it? She said, "Oh yeah, go ahead." Like, sure, it's that easy. But I tried writing that story down. I could not do it. I tried and tried and tried to write that story down, and the thing that came to me was, you are participating in the death of your culture in a profound way. Stories are part of an oral tradition. How dare you? How dare you think you can do that? And I tried to write that story down so I could share it. I couldn't do it. I wrote it down. The paper would get lost. I'd write it down. It wasn't the right way. I'd write it down, and then it would disappear again. And finally, Ali Kazme, who is an award-winning film director with the National Film Board, was at our occupation camp. And no one has ever seen any of the video that he's done except for this one piece, because the National Film Board will not allow any filmmaker to release even 1 minute of video that is involved in an ongoing litigation. And because the Sinixt have been involved in litigation for the reversal of the declared extinction of us, he has not been able to produce any film from all of the footage that he took. But he was there that one day and he said, "Marilyn, what can I film today?" Eva was there. I said, I know. Would you film Eva telling the Frog Mountain story in the Sinixt dialect? So he set up his camera and began filming, and that story in the dialect is on our Sinixt website, www.sinixtnation.org, for free. It's just there. It was the catalyst then that's the way this story would have been presented to the people of the land in the language of the land. And it was almost like that was the permission to go ahead and take that story out to the public. Now, you think these things aren't that great. Once we started telling the story of that mountain, Frog Mountain, which is right there. You look at that mountain and it's there. That mountain was called Sugarloaf or Airy Mountain. until the story came out. Once the story of Frog Mountain came out, it changed the perspective of everyone, not just the Sinixt. That mountain is no longer known as Sugarloaf. No one calls it that anymore. No one calls it Airy Mountain. Everybody refers to that mountain as Frog Peak or Frog Mountain. And we now have businesses. We have the Frog Peak Cafe. We have the Frog Mountain Pet Resort. We have the reference to people in the community. So these stories can open the eyes of the people and inform the general public of what these land formations mean, how they have impacted and direct us and guide us in how we behave as human beings on our landscape. That's what that story does. So for this book to make you, this is a forced thing. You actually have to engage your ears. Your ears have to actually be connected to your brain to get the story. And that's the way it always was. You listen. You're not there with your tablet or your book with a third thing. You sit. You engage your ears. You listen. Once your ears are engaged and you start listening, man, the images can come forward, how you're thinking, and you can get real judgmental too. That coyote's a real jerk, or, you'll go, why did that chickadee have to behave that way? Or, like it there, and it also informs you of yourself and where you are immediately at that moment, because it could be another day and all that stuff wouldn't bug you at all. That wouldn't be your response at all. That's just chickadee's job, coyote's a jerk, aren't we all sometimes? So again, it is about where you're at. It is about informing you. It is about engaging your ears and doing it in a traditional sense. And so honoring that in this book, this publication, having that as part of it makes me really appreciate, again, another layer of how we approach our culture. It can't always just be that particular way because that's the way it's done. It's all done in a book. Well, no, it doesn't all have to be done in a book. Some of it can be, but how we honor what we know culturally, how we engage even the non-Sinixt in what we know, and if we honor it and bring it forth respectfully, then we can expect the people who are not Sinixt to engage respectfully, to honor those stories, to come to their own understanding and interaction with intercultural experiences. We all have to begin somewhere. We all have our own culture.
This is the copyright page. People have seen these. Right here is the password and the username to get these stories off of the internet. You go to the website, it's all here on this page. Just so if you buy a copy of the book and you're like, oh, how do I get to those stories? Remember me holding up the copyright page, you'll find it there.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the book. Today is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. And all the fathers who aren't there, they're the ancestral fathers. We honor them too. And want to thank the museum for hosting this. And where we go from here in truth and reconciliation. It's not a conversation we can have in one day. It's not something that can be done whippity snap. It is an ongoing process to gain understanding, respect, love, honor, all of those things, how we should be treating each other. So my daughter is going to go and visit her dad. And so I want to give her an opportunity to tell a story. I'm, really proud of my daughter, and my grandchildren are in the back of the book, and just engaging. And even that little guy, whenever I make a prayer and pull out the tobacco, he's always got to put his hand in there and grab a fistful of tobacco. And, they start real young, and having that as part of my support system and what keeps me going, that's the joy, that's the hope, that's the vision. And I want to turn the mic over to Therese so she can tell a story, and then we'll get on with another story maybe. So this is Therese. You don't need a mic.
Neva, are you gonna come listen? Neva, are you gonna come listen? I'm gonna do the story you want.
Come sit.
I'd like just to say that I'm really proud of this body of work that we put together as a collective. We worked really hard on the project. And when we first started, I was, because I've always heard people growing up, we're working on this project, it's gonna be really great. But then it would just sort of fizzle out, or something would happen, and it would have to change direction. But this time it was just like from start to finish, we got the project done. And so it felt so good to finally be a part of that. So yeah, I'm really proud of our work. And the story I'm going to tell you is not a traditional Sinixt story. It's one of my daughter's favorites, just because she's a bit of a spook. And it's about how mosquitoes were created. And a bit of the background of the story, when I was growing up, and after Eva sort of told us the Frog Mountain story, and we started to sort of take on storytelling as a family, we would go to these storytelling events in Portland, Oregon. And so you'd go there, and the first night was the best because you would get to hear storytellers from all different nations all over the Northwest. So this is this story comes from the coast, and the guy who told me this story, he told it to a whole audience, but it was just like, he was the best, one of the best storytellers I had ever seen, because he just put, I don't know, so much oomph into it. And so this one is my daughter's favorite. So every time I go someplace with her and she's like, oh, tell this story. So I'll tell you the story because she's here. But there's motions to the story, so you have to kind of do the motions with me, and it makes it a lot of fun. So when I say Takuya, you have to say with long hair, long fingers, gnarly teeth, and bad breath. Yeah, you think it's funny. So a long time ago, there was this village. And in this village, there were many families. And the children usually worked right along their parents and helped them with all of the tasks that needed to be done for survival. Well, one day the parents said, oh, you guys just go to the beach. You guys go have some fun. And it was a really hot day, so all the kids were so excited. They took off to the beach, and they were having such a good time. Well, from the hot sun, they started to get really tired. And so they all started to doze off. one by one. And there was this one little boy. It was getting later in the evening, and this one little boy, he woke up with a chill because the sun was going down behind the mountain, and so he could feel it on his skin. And so he jolted up, and he started to look around, and he got panicked because he had remembered a legend that his family had told him about this monster woman, Takuya, with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her bad breath. And the legend was that if you were out of your home at night, that she would come and snatch you up, put you in her beautiful cedar basket, and take you back to her camping site and eat you. So the little boy, remembering this, started to get really scared. And so he tried to awake his friends, and he's going around and he's saying, wake up, she's gonna come get us, she's gonna come get us. But some of the boys and girls didn't believe the legend. So they just sort of dozed back to sleep, and he's really trying hard to wake his friends. Wake up, she's coming, she's coming. And as he's doing that, he hears a twig snap in the forest behind him. So he stops and he looks and he's going, oh God, here she comes. And so he's trying again, harder and harder, and he hears another twig snap behind him, but this time it's even closer. And so he panics and he goes, it's Takuya with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her bad breath. And so he panics and he goes and he's looking all over the beach and he doesn't know what to do, and so he goes and he hides behind this big log. And he can hear something in the bush, and he's praying that it's a deer. And it's getting closer and closer, and it's sounding heavier and heavier. And pretty soon, out from the forest, steps Takuya with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her bad breath. And the legends were true. She was the most hideous thing he had ever seen. She was just hideous, and he couldn't get past it, and he was so scared, and he was so frightened, and he was peeing his pants behind the log, and he's looking at all of his poor friends out there, all laying on the beach. And of course, she has an ear-to-ear grin because she hasn't gotten this kind of treat in a very long time. And so she's looking and she's smiling, and she takes off of her back this beautifully crafted cedar basket and sets it down, and she just starts giggling as she's tossing the children in. And as she's doing that, they're waking up and they're starting to scream because they see that the legends were true about Takuya with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her bad breath. So the little boy, he's behind the log and he's scared and he doesn't know what to do, and she's having the best time of her life getting all of these children and putting them in her basket. And finally she's done, so she puts the big basket on her back and she takes off through the forest. And the little boy says, well, he's thinking to himself, what do I do? You know, like, do I go back to the village? If I go back to the village, by the time we get back here, she's going to be long gone. There's no chance of us ever seeing those children again. So he's looking around and he's just panicked and he doesn't know what to do. So he picks up a shell and he takes off after her. Now she's like this big, tall woman. And so she's got these really long legs, so she's running through the forest, and he's got these little short legs. And so he's running behind her as fast as he can, and the brush from her is swinging back and whacking him in the face, and he's trying really hard to catch up. And as he's running, he's not really paying attention to his feet, and he steps on a twig and it snaps. And so, of course, Takuya stops with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her bad breath. And she stops and she looks behind him, and the little boy freezes right behind her and doesn't move. And somehow she doesn't see him. She goes, this must be something, and maybe I snapped that twig. And so she takes off running again. So they're running through the forest and they come to this really steep mountain. And she just takes off up the mountain. And it's not even hard for her. But the little boy, he's clawing and he's trying so hard and he can sort of see her footprints, but he's kind of losing her, but he's like, I just got to keep going. So he puts his head down and he just gets to work and he takes off. And he's climbing and he's clawing, and pretty soon it kind of flattens out and there's this beautiful meadow. And in the back he can see this beautiful lodge on the edge of the forest through this meadow. And then in the center he sees Takuya with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth, and her breath. And she's in the middle of this meadow, and there's this big pit, and around it are all these stakes. And looks so happy and excited, and he can hear his friends in the basket screaming for help. And so he's just sort of waiting in the woods there, kind of watching what she's doing. And one by one, she's taking out his friends and tying them up on the stakes. And then pretty soon, she's building up a fire. And the fire, he can see, is getting really hot. And his friends are wiggling and they're screaming and their little cheeks and faces are getting really red and roasted. And Takuya, with her long hair and her long fingers, her gnarly teeth and her bad breath, is like, oh man, I haven't feasted like this in a really long time. I'm gonna go get some spice from my lodge. So she takes off to her lodge, and the boy can hear her in there singing a happy song, and she's gathering up the spices. And so he decides that this is his opportunity to go and help his friends. So he takes that shell and he runs over to the pit and he starts sawing with that shell as fast as he can and as hard as he can to cut her ropes. And it takes a lot of work. And one by one, the children, instead of staying behind and helping this brave kid out, they just take off into the forest and leave him. But he doesn't get discouraged, he just keeps going. So by the time she comes out, there's only one child left, and he's really working on those ropes. And she sees this, and she screams the most hideous and foul scream. And the boy just keeps working harder, and he can hear her running. And the last child got freed and ran into the forest, but he knew that if he tried to run into the forest, he wouldn't make it. So at this point, he just starts running around the fire pit. And Takuya, with her long hair, her long fingers, her gnarly teeth and bad breath, is chasing him. And he's just so panicked, he doesn't know what to do. He just is running around this fire pit, and she is screaming, and she's, I'm gonna get you, you little monster, for freeing away my feast. And the little boy is crying, and he's trying to keep his feet going, but he's just so exhausted. And the last child that he freed stopped at the forest line and looked back. And he really felt bad for his buddy, because he was like, man, if I don't go there, she is going to eat that kid, and then all of his work is for nothing. So he grabs whatever he found, a big long stick, and so he ran back with this big long stick, and the little boy ran by, and then he threw the stick at Takuya with her long hair, long fingers, gnarly teeth, and bad breath. And the stick got stuck in her legs, and she tripped over it, and into the fire pit she fell. And she started to burn alive. And she was screaming, and she's like, help me, please, please, I promise, if you just pull me out of this fire, I promise I'll never eat another child again. And the two children looked at her and they said, yeah, right, we don't believe you. You're definitely gonna eat us if we help you. And so she's screaming and she's writhing in pain, and all of a sudden she explodes. and she explodes into the air. And as her ashes are coming down, they start to turn into mosquitoes. And that's why to this day, mosquitoes always go after children, is because it's Takuya looking for her revenge.
Okay. Thoughts? Questions? Anybody want to wade in? What that story's all about? No? Happy just to let it digest? Marilyn? Do you have a story for us? Do you have a comment on that?
Sure, I have a story. I'll tell the story of how the Sinixt came to be. And it's not only how the Sinixt came to be, it's the Columbia River story. So we Sinixt are synonymous with the Columbia River. And by the way, this is a coyote story. And you know Coyote. He's lewd. He's crude. He's an idiot skirt chasing real character. But on the other hand, Coyote is a demigod. He can create things. He's awesome. He's magnificent. I like to equate Coyote to a human condition. Because human beings, on one hand, can just be stupid idiots. And on the other hand, have compassion, empathy, create great things, build technology, build airplanes that fly in the sky, build satellites that go to outer space. And yet, we put so much garbage into this planet. We've got garbage islands in the ocean. That's how stupid we are. We're so stupid, we're changing the climate of this planet to make it uninhabitable by fellow human beings. So, on one hand, we give it. On the other hand, we can take it away. So, Coyote is just a representation of human fallibility and also human greatness. So, this is a story about Coyote, and oh my gosh, it was so long ago, there was nothing on the landscape. No trees, no nothing. There was nothing here. Coyote was walking, over to the east and north a little bit, a place we might call Canal Flats today. And he was walking around. Well, Coyote, he was a real character. He had a condition whenever beautiful women came around. Things would happen to Coyote. It was like 1,000 balloons rubbed over his body. His hair would stand on end, electrified, and sometimes cover his eyes like that. The other thing that happened to Coyote, his foot would move uncontrollably up and down, sideways even, back. Oh man, it just went crazy. And sometimes it'd switch off and it'd be the other one, and he could hardly keep his balance, that guy, when it got going. The third thing that happened to Coyote when pretty girls came around, big gobs of drool would start coming out of his mouth, running down his chest like that. He'd slurp it up because, you know, that's just what you did when you were a creep. And so, Coyote's walking along, and all of a sudden, whoop, his hair gets electrified, his legs start stamping, he's drooling and he's going, where is she? Where's the pretty girl? Oh my God, she must be gorgeous, he says. And he's brushing his hair out of his eyes. He's trying to see where this beautiful woman is. And he spots the drop dead gorgeous, inside and out, by the way, beautiful Rain. He runs up to her. Oh, baby, you're so pretty. I love you. I want to marry you. Oh, baby, you're so pretty. And Rain thinks this guy's a real creep. And so she turns her back to him and walks away. He runs after her, foot thumping around. Oh, baby, you're so pretty. You're gonna marry me. Oh. And she walks a little faster. And he pursues her. And she walks a little faster. And of course, there's no shade. There's nothing. He's worked himself right into exhaustion. Rain, he says, Rain, you don't have to marry me or nothing. Just share your gift with me. And of course, please, Rain, please. And she sees in her peripheral vision how pitiful he is. And her heart wants to have compassion, but he's so creepy. She just keeps walking. He says, I'll give you presents if you share your gift with me. Please, Rain, please. And of course, she just keeps walking. Really, I'll give you lots of presents, he said. She just keeps walking. All of a sudden he said, okay, Rain, if you don't share your gift with me, I'm gonna make you fall in love with me. She goes, who does this creep think he is anyway? No one can make you fall in love with him. And so she just keeps walking. He begs her some more. And he says, okay, that's it. I'm gonna make you fall in love with me if you don't share your gift with me. She wouldn't stop walking, and so Coyote began singing his love song. In whom gone way, in whom gone way, in whom gone way. Soon a fine mist started coming out of the sky, and still Coyote sang his love song. Soon big fat drops were falling out of the sky, and Coyote sang his love song. Soon there was a torrential downpour. Oh, it was coming down in sheets, and the ground began getting covered with water, and it was splashing down and it was splashing up. and still Coyote sang his love song. Rain picked Coyote up in her arms, and she began carrying him across the landscape, and he sang his love song. Oh, they had gone far, and then all of a sudden, Coyote stopped singing his love song. Rain looked up. She went, "Oh no! Oh my God!" They had indeed traveled to the land of the drop-dead, gorgeous cousin of rain, Ocean. Coyote had spotted Ocean and stopped singing his love song to Rain. Rain was so disgusted with herself at that point because she indeed had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love with Coyote. She reached into her chest. She pulled out her spouse, her heart. She hurled it back where they came from. And there her heart landed on the ground. Boom, 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 boom. And it pumped the essence of rain out of it, and it began traveling across the land. The essence of rain, and it came right to where they were. Rain said to Coyote, "You're a scamp and you're a scoundrel. But you promised me many presents. I will have them now. I will have what you promised me." He said, "Oh yes, oh yes. I'm going to give you all of these presents to prove how much I love you." And there Coyote began taking little pieces off of his body. He says, "These beings will go to your heart pathway, sometimes in their own good time, sometimes they'll be there all the time." He placed bears and beavers, water birds, peregrine falcons and eagles, all the little creatures that would go to her heart path and show their reverence and respect. He reached behind his neck and he pulled out a big handful of fur. "Ow, ow, ow," he said. And he set that right next to her pathway, and it turned into thousands and thousands of fish. He says, "These beings will come up your heart pathway every spring by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, and they'll prove how much I love you." He reached behind his tail and he grabbed another tuft of hair. "Ow, ow, ow," he said, and he laid that down next to Rain's heart path. It turned into thousands again, thousands of salmon, and he said, "And these beings will come up your pathway every fall by the thousands and prove to you how much I love you," he said, after they spent some time with me. He said, "My last gift to you." reached into his chest and he took out a little of his spa'us, his heart. He said, these beings will come to you every day, honor you, show you reverence, love you every day, go to their sweat lodges at the edge of your heart path. He said he set them all around her heart. That's the Sinixt people whose main responsibility it is to love the heart of Rain, to demonstrate their love, reverence, and honor of Rain's heart every single day, to go to her. And he says, one day, he says, I will come here to your heart and I will set everything as right as rain. But in the meantime, I'm going with ocean. To this very day, the Sinixt people wait for Sinixt to return from the ocean up the Columbia River, where he will go to the place of Rain's heart and set everything right. And that is the story of the Columbia River. Now, that story would have been very little to do with Coyote. That would have been a teaching story that the Sinixt people would have told during the winter months. They would have named every animal that utilizes the same waterways that we utilize. They would have taught the nesting times of the water birds and how you respect and give those water birds their space. When bears come to the water and eat the fish, how you back off of your fishing spot and give them a place. All of the birds who are the flighted ones, like the eagles and the peregrine falcons, when their babies come and how you respect them and what you do and how you share the water with everyone, the times that they would use it. Now, Coyote would have been like the spice in a soap opera, when somebody is teaching class and the students are nodding off and snoring, then the storyteller might throw in a little tidbit about Coyote and his antics, and people would go, what did that stupid idiot Coyote do? And then they'd get interested again in what the teachings were. So the Coyote aspect of that story would have simply been the little antics around keeping people engaged and interested in the real information that they would be conducted to them through these teachings. So we know where we come from. We know how long we've been on this landscape. So at the time of the Columbia River and its creation is synonymous with how long the Sinixt people have inhabited this landscape and what our responsibilities and purposes are for inhabiting this landscape and following our cultural laws like the Huklok and the law of the land, following the cultural laws of Smum'in, which I represent as the matriarch. The big law, the law of the land, is just that. Everything that's here tells us how to take care of it, how to make room for it. The second law, smamim, literally translates, means belongs to the women. This tumhula belongs to the women. And when you see my name and I say matriarch of smamim, that's what I mean. I'm here, I'm teaching, I'm representing, I'm doing the work of the people. Now, does smamim only mean Sinixt? No. Smamim is for every single person who puts their feet on this Sinixt Tumhula, who accepts their responsibility to take care of the water, of the land, to stand for those things. Yeah, I'm a bit of a radical. I've been arrested for protecting water and for protecting land. I'd gladly go back to jail and face those things because that's my responsibility. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody wants to go to jail. And it's not that I want to go to jail, it's just that I would. So you have to figure out your own place, how you stand on this land, what your responsibilities are, what you're going to stand up for and be a part of. And so Joan has brought a project forward. It is about reconciliation. That's what Joan, not just Joan, but this institution, this museum, wants to profile as the work of history. That's what museums are. That's what they represent, is history. Now, people can invent history and do invent history, and we've got that happening all the time, you know? There's even a group of people on this very day who believe the earth is flat. Now, what are you going to do with that? Send them on a boat towards the edge, I guess. It doesn't matter what people believe. It's how you represent the truth. It's how you honor the truth and carry yourself forward in that truth and work for it. And we all have work to do, and how we honor that and bring that work forward is part of what we're doing here today with the book launch and with the Truth and Reconciliation. So thank you very much for listening to my story. Are you going to go now? Okay.
Grandkids should love this stuff. We should together with all of us.
Any
Thoughts, comments, questions?
With the ceremony of tears, I'm wondering how do you think that works into the Columbia River story with the salmon no longer coming back every 4 years?
The ceremony of tears was a ceremony that the Sinixt held just south of the border here when the dams went up and stopped the salmon from coming up the Columbia River.
1937.
I think that this is what I believe. I believe that Coyote, in all of his profound stupidity, bye, have a good trip. I believe that Coyote, in all of his profound stupidity, also was a prophet. I think Coyote saw the issues that were coming. I think he saw that where we were all headed was down a not a good path. and that at some point he may have to return and start putting people's feet back on a path to bring social justice, humanity, consciousness, empathy, all those things to people's hearts, to set things right about how we relate with one another. I will say this is going to be my rant, and thank you for allowing me to bring the rant. You're going to hear in the next little bit Colville Confederated Tribes, Okanagan Nation, Secwepemc, all the tribes now claiming Sinixt territory want to bring the salmon back into the Upper Columbia. Let's figure this out. Let's bring the salmon back. It's honorable work. Absolutely not. No way do I want salmon back up here. For the last 6 years, Fukushima has put a Chernobyl a day into the Pacific Ocean. And you cannot tell me that that hasn't had an effect. When the salmon are being caught down in the lower mainland right now, they're testing them. They're full of pathogens. You know what pathogens are? You take cancer medicine. You piss out the medicine your body doesn't absorb. That's a pathogen. You take cancer medicine, you take pain medicine, you take hormones, you take testosterone, you take any kind of a medication. Your body only absorbs so much. What your body pisses out is a pathogen. Those are now embedded in the fish that are caught off the lower mainland because there is not a membrane that can filter pathogens out of water. Then they swim right along the coast where they're collecting all those pathogens, and they come up the Columbia River. They hit the fluoride emission plumes from the Alcoa aluminum plants, which cause fishy Alzheimer's. Fish can't even remember where to spawn. It's also an effect. In Portland, Oregon, it is so toxic that when it rains, they advise you as a parent not to allow your children to play in mud puddles without galoshes on. And so the kids have got to put on rubber boots in order to go play in mud puddles around Portland, Oregon. When it rains and there's puddles, where do you think that rain goes when it goes down a gutter? It goes right into the river. So all that toxicity is going right into the Columbia River, running right through the middle of Portland, Oregon. Then you come up the gorge, it's all laced with pesticides from all of the agriculture and all of the fun things to do along the Columbia River, like golfing and all of that. So you get that pesticides. Then the fish swim up past Hanford Nuclear Reservation that's leaching into the Columbia River, and actually is so hot that when the when the flies go, they can create hot spots around the Tri-Cities from the radioactivity. And then, guess what? They come right up here below the border to Lake Roosevelt, where It is so laden with heavy metals that if you went to Spokane to get a fishing license from the health department in Spokane, you would see the health warning on the wall that says, if you catch fish in Lake Roosevelt, do not consume more than 8 ounces of fish per year. And do not eat the skin or the fat of the fish. Now, when you bring salmon back up, guess what they do? They spawn and they die, and instead of nutrient loading like in past times when fish were pristine, they would be toxic loading every stream they spawn in, every river they spawn in above the border. Is that what you want here? Do you think that's an honorable thing to bring salmon back? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. We need to figure out what is right for us. Right now, I say we got resident fish here who need our attention. The kokanee are not thriving. Let's look at what we can do to make our resident fish thrive. The whitefish, the lardo trout, all of these big water bodies, they're taking fertilizer from Kaminko and dumping it by the ton in the Arrow Lakes to oxygenate the water to feed the fish. So we have a lot of work we should focus on right here before we start figuring out some coyote stupid. Anyway, thanks. Well, you can finish up with the book.
While we're waiting for JJ to come back, when she's coming back, I wanted to mention that, as you can see, Marilyn is not extinct, hence the title. It's very much alive and kicking. The Sinixt were declared extinct by the Canadian government in 1956. Working on this project, we were funded by 3 levels of government. The federal government, through the Canada Arts Council, gave us money for this project. The BC Arts Council gave us money for this project, provincial, and the Columbia Basin Trust. So it seems like all levels of the government agree that the Sinixts exist, and we need to drive that point home. If anyone's interested, Mall Press is hosting a petition to ask the federal government to reverse the extinction of the Sinixt, and it's available here on the book table. Also, there will be books for sale. You can get them signed at this point just by Marilyn. Teresa's gone. And there's a special deal at this point. If you buy them here, you can get 2 for $50 or 3 for $70. An excellent gift for your friends. It's too early to think about Christmas, but maybe you can if you have a big house to stash them away. Also, these books are available through the Boundary Museum and at other bookstores in Castlegar, Nelson, Caslow, New Denver. So keep it in mind, and also through the Mall Press website, they can be ordered. Okay.
Thank you, KL. Thank you, Marilyn. Oh, and thank you, Therese. Oh, that was so wonderful. I think we're going to conclude. Last but not least, the program kind of got reversed. I'd really like to introduce JJ Verigin. He's been an inspiration and a visionary for this Sinixt Doukhobor reconciliation project. He has guided me and helped the museum every step of the way. And in fact, when we first talked about it, I got so excited about his vision of Doukhobors and Sinixt deepening in to what reconciliation means, that eventually we would take it to the school children. And I saw this happening on a larger and larger scale, and I wanted it to go throughout the province and Victoria and Ottawa, and to really have a changing story, a changing narrative, and an understanding of history that's different. And so the Doukhobors know about this alternative history and story because that's their pathway. And I'm so honored to introduce J.J. Verigin.
I always get nervous when people start giving me credit for stuff. This reconciliation may be happening between two cultures, but I think it has to be understood that for reconciliation to take place, there has to be an environment for reconciliation. And so I see people sitting here today that have created that environment. I see Laurie Barkley standing there leaning against the post, and the last time I think I shared the mic with Marilyn was at an event at the Mir Center for Peace that Laurie organized. And again, I think I was the only guy there speaking with several women. And Laurie has been doing a lot of good work in that respect. I also see Linda Wilkinson sitting here, and I know that she has an appointment. I would really like to hear a few words from her, because I know that her and her husband Myler were instrumental in this whole process. I see other people sitting here too that basically demonstrate the fact that even if there's a willingness to bridge differences, to gain information, get to know each other better, to become friends, it doesn't only take the parties or the principals primarily concerned. There has to be an environment for it. And so I think we're very fortunate to live in communities that, if not, in which there are people that facilitate such processes, because whatever we want to call them, we could call them coyotes, we could call them jerks, we could call them all sorts of things. There are people that are also capable of obstructing the reconciliation. And usually when that happens, it's things that we wish to put behind us that surface. Things like power. So when people get displaced, people that are used to wielding power, there could be challenges. It's nice to run down the road in bare feet and then you hit upon a pebble, and then there's a little bit of pain. And yes, there is pain involved. A couple of weeks ago, this woman spoke at our opening of our 71st Annual Union of Youth Festival in Brilliant. And as she was speaking, tears came to her. And I was sitting there listening to her words, and I was thinking about what was precipitating or prompting those tears, because she has been trying to bring her people back from extinction, as if someone could declare people extinct. And I think maybe she was shedding some tears because she may be, or I thought maybe she was looking at the people that were heading to extinction. And so when we're talking about reconciliation, and when we're talking about cultures and understanding cultures, wasn't it nice to hear those stories that were shared by Marilyn and her daughter?
Yeah.
Wasn't it nice being held captive to those stories and not having to rush somewhere else? Because stories take a long time for them to make their impact. we live in a culture and in a climate and an environment where there's no time for nothing. I was asking a woman she came from a Buddhist background, that she was here writing a book on refugees, and she considered the Doukhobors one of the first refugees. And so we were chatting there at a gathering, and she was also interested about the well-being of our culture. And I asked her, we were thinking, what would be critical words that different cultures or traditions identify with? And so I always think, when I think of Buddhism, I think of mindfulness, the expression mindfulness. And I asked Janet, is it possible to be mindfully multitasking? She said, can I make a t-shirt like that? I wonder what the Buddha would have said about that one. There are some people, in addition to the reconciliation process that's been taking place between our communities, there's been a reconciliation process taking place within the Doukhobor community as well. So when there are differences of opinion within the indigenous community, we're no strangers to that. The tragedy is, I guess it just takes time for people to get to the point where they're ready for that reconciliation. I come from a background where I think I'm the most fortunate person in the world. I say that because of when I was born, where I was born, to whom I was born, how I was raised. And I say that because all sorts of human indicators today indicate that we've peaked. You probably heard on the news that the life range of an American male has dropped by 2 years for the first time since they started recording it. How many times have you heard the story that the young people today are not going to have as great of a life as their parents, when it was always the conditioning of every generation to make it better for the subsequent one?
That's true.
You know, last century when they changed, they said that the change only came after the end of the First World War. So that the 20th century only started in 1918. Think about it, folks. 2018. We're in the 21st century, and look at our world. Things are upside down and getting inverted. And I guess where I'm coming from in terms of the reconciliation process within our community, the Doukhobor community, it's when my fellow brothers and sisters from my tradition get mad at me for speaking to people that we used to guard ourselves against in the past. Some people still have difficulty understanding how come we pray, we play, we sing together today. And so when we come to our recognition of the errors of the past and working to build a better present and future, one of the things that get my craw the most is when people from my culture complain about the benefits that the indigenous people are quote-unquote receiving. And they say, geez, well, they don't have to pay taxes and they can fish whenever they want and hunt and all that. And I'm thinking, you stupid jackasses. You know, I could remember when we were called dirty dukes. I could remember when people that stood up for peace were accused of being traitors. And then my generation grows up and, you know, we're asked to lead the peace walks in Vancouver with 80,000 people, together with all the politicos of the day. And so I wonder what kind of stress that this generation grew up with. When things that Doukhobors are known for, like volunteerism and community, and people my age, because they're parents, I'm thinking of women that were not working mothers, not professionals. They used to come together to socialize in order to also bake and sell stuff so that we could build our facilities and engage in the things that we engage in. And today's women don't have that time. But some of them don't even have that sense anymore because their mom said, go and do that daughter or son, all take your role here, and they became disconnected from their culture in that manner. And then it always seems like we human beings want to elevate ourselves and be one step up. It even is represented in our voting. Working class people will vote one level above themselves because just by that vote they think that they will raise themselves somehow. And that's what I want to come to, is because we in this culture define ourselves by material. Material, we say, is ours. So, it struck me in the East, when we talk about traditions, you hear people say that they want to experience something. In the West, when we talk about traditions, you hear people say they want to own it. There's something wrong there, folks. How could you understand what it feels like to be classified extinct, to lose your culture, to lose your language, to be denigrated, to be insulted, and you equate that with taxes and fishing? That's the nature that our society has come to. I'm glad that we have young people like Tress, whose mom has passed down the tradition of storytelling, the oral tradition. Today when I get together with some young folks from my culture, and there's 10 of them in a room, they're sitting around in a circle. They're not talking to each other. They're talking with their thumbs. In Brilliant, the preschool, the teachers are taking the kids out and teaching them how to plant a garden so that young people will have a connection. And so, brothers and sisters, in addition to the reconciliation that takes place within the people that you see here and that are present here, we need to see that reconciliation taking place on a much larger scale, and maybe that's what Joan was referencing. And I have to also say, I see Colleen here. Thanks for being here, Colleen. Because we need that reconciliation right from the lowest, not the lowest in a judgmental sense, right here in our communities. We've got to come together. And Grand Forks, having gone through this tragedy of flooding, there's a silver lining. It gives us an opportunity to build the kind of community we wish to see in a proactive manner, as opposed to react and do it abikak, Russian expression for any which way. Marilyn mentioned coyote. When I was a little kid growing up, I was sleeping on the floor in my grandmother's house in Brilliant, in one of those old communal buildings, with my brother and my cousin, the three of us. And my grandma would make us read our prayers. And she would explain what the prayers were about. And then she would tell us stories. And the stories that we heard today, how many of them resonate with the different cultures represented today? What culture and what tradition does not want to try to elevate the human spirit and denigrate all that detracts from what we could be? My granny used to say to me, I'm translating because she spoke Russian, you better watch out, Johnny, otherwise the bums are going to get you. I always wondered, what the heck is this word, bum? I know a rat, that's krisa. Us Doukhobors have our own language too. But boom, and then it finally dawned on me what she was talking about. Because when she was young, growing up in the Kootenays, having come here from Saskatchewan, having come here from Russia, it was during the time of the Depression. Who's riding the railways, folks? Bums. How did she take that to mean? Today, our world has to reconcile so that we break through and break out of the stuff that you see and hear when you turn on social media or any media. When you see people that you were raised to sort of look up to, act worse than coyotes, worse than bums. The young people growing up aren't going to get their lessons from those folks, brothers and sisters. The young people growing up today are not going to get those lessons, not from agencies that have no time. So it's very important for us, if we are concerned about our world, to make a little time to think about what we're doing and to speak to each other and try to convince each other, even no matter how difficult it may be, that the other side of that word of rights is the word that you heard this woman use several times in her presentation, responsibility. We're not asking for martyrs. We're asking people to try find a balance. This woman has a lot of challenges, internal, external. The first time we met, she was protesting in front of a conference I organized. And all these big shots from all over the place were there, and they were all spooked out. What are we going to do? There's placards. So I did what I thought was in our tradition. I invited them to the banquet. The ceremony at the rock that Joan referred to took place with a grandson of a person that hated our people so much for perceived or real damage to his people that he would not come to Castlegar. And he was a good, honorable person. We made a little step at the confluence of the Kootenai, Columbia, because what is so difficult about saying, I am sorry? What is so difficult? We talk about love, just like rights, responsibilities. If a person can't forgive, how can they love? You can't. And so, folks, this issue of reconciliation is not restricted to two old cultures. In fact, I would submit that if we wish as human beings to make it to the 22nd century, we better revisit some of these old cultures. And we maybe should discern what is necessary to be flushed from the culture that is foisted upon us sometimes without even us being aware of it. We all know when reconciliation begins, it never ends. It is an ongoing process, and it can't be restricted to soirees or gatherings. It has to be like when we reference our own internal reconciliation. We have to work with each other. We have to have our sweat fall on each other's arms. We have to share our stories. And so I just want to, again, thank Joan for her unbridled enthusiasm and drive. Her colleagues and employers, the board of the Boundary Museum Society, whose president who is with us here today, along with other board members that were introduced, people from Selkirk College that also played a very strong role in initiating, facilitating this process by bringing us together to work on the Year Center. There were some names mentioned, Linda and Milo, of course. Duff Sutherland, I believe, also should be mentioned. Crystal, Victor, Duncan. That's what I said. It's not just two people. And an ongoing process. Wonderful book. I just encourage people, pick it up, share it. Okay? Thank you.
I just want to talk a little bit about the cornerstone for this project and what Joan saw as the cornerstone of an event that happened at Brilliant. The thing is that yes, when you can make some steps forward, it doesn't mean that that's where you stay. Sometimes you make one step forward, 4 steps back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 1 step forward, 5 steps back. When this all began, Myler Wilkinson came and asked me, could you bring the elders to do a blessing for the Mir Peace Center? Could you? You know what my first response was? Hell no. Until I can see people can treat my elders with respect, then demonstrate to me how much it means for me to bring my elders there. Came back again, asked again, asked again, asked again. It took like 4 years before I actually asked my elders to participate in that blessing ceremony at the Mir Peace Center. We all thought the Mir Peace Center was going to represent the cornerstone for peace, truthful reconciliation, and eventually be a voice for the recognition of the Sinixt people. Instead, it has turned into a very ugly thing. And you would know this because it's still being profiled as the Peace Center, where Marilyn James is not welcome to come and present to Selkirk College classes, even though I was a big part of bringing that Peace Center back to life in terms of what does peace represent? It represents through the Doukhobor house that was resurrected there, a blessing from the extincted people who have a 12,000-year history on the landscape, looking at the oppression of peoples and social justice issues. And if we want to move forward, we have to have all of these catalysts as community people, but we also have to have a commitment. When you engage an institution, by the way, that doesn't have an academic freedom policy, an institution that can decide who are the right Indians and who are the wrong Indians, an institution that can develop a memorandum of understanding only from the Indians we want to hear from. Not the Indians who've occupied and stood against the government and the cops for 30 years, standing up for the rights of the land, standing on the cultural laws of the Sinixt people. When you have institutions that hold institutional oppression and hold the position of colonial oppression, because there is no bigger oppressor in the colonial Holocaust that's happened on this landscape than schools. Now, to see education entering into another layer of oppression, colonial oppression, human rights violations, social justice violations. We as people from the public, because that is a public institution, just as this is a public institution, We have to hold our public institutions responsible for the bullshit they're putting out there. And we also have to pat them on the back when they're telling the truth and doing the right thing. And how we do that is by us engaging as community, as people who have something to offer, whether it's volunteering to make great food, by the way, or whether it's organizing events and putting together exhibits. Institutions are at the crux of truth and reconciliation, and if we as community members do not hold our institutions' feet to the fire, we are doomed to continue this process of violations. Not truth, not reconciliation. And just as a Sinixt person, I would say there is no truth or reconciliation with the Sinixt people as long as we remain in extinct status. It is the people of this province, it is the people of this country that has to hold the politicos responsible and to turn that shitty piece of legislation and declared extinction around.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, JJ. Thank you, KL. This has been an incredible afternoon for me. I've learned a lot, and I hope we can repeat this and other persons come out. I would just like to summarize and end by saying, from what I've heard from everybody, reconciliation involves responsibility and participation, respect. So however you want to do that in this community where we are, we would welcome it. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. On behalf of us three here, could we thank you also for putting this together? Thank you so much. I see Shannon there.